Hello and welcome to the Wealth Advisory's Top 10 for November 2021. I am your host, Jason Williams, and as you may have noticed, Britt and Ryle is not with me this week. Britt is actually pursuing other opportunities and has left the Wealth Advisory. We wish him the best of luck, and we really appreciate his time here, and hope for all of his success. But the show must go on, so I'm here, and with me I have one of my older colleagues. I'm going to say older, more tenured colleagues in the industry. This is Jason Simpkins. Jason and I met years and years ago when I first started in the newsletter industry, and he was one of the guys that sort of helped me get my feet under me, so to speak. And he runs an investment service called Wall Street's Proving Ground, and he also has one of our stocks in his portfolio, Maxar. And so I wanted to bring him on as somebody who's also really interested in the future of the space race, and sort of talk about Maxar a little bit, but more so talk about an under-the-radar opportunity that Jason's uncovered in a stock that may have even more potential than Maxar, but really just nobody's picking up on yet. And I really wanted to have him let you in a little bit on this one. So, Jason, thank you very much for being on today. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like you said, I think we've known each other for about 10 years.
Yeah,
we've been in the business together a long time. It's nice to be involved in a project like this.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on the show. Maxar's been super successul for our investors, pretty successful for yours too.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Maxar. You know, they do a lot of satellite imagery, and I think, you've probably discussed it here, but I think a lot of times when people think of that kind of thing, they think of like Google Earth or something like that. But what they do is really so much more, because they offer a lot of 3D modeling of terrain, of urban centers. And so when people throw around words like infrastructure or, that kind of thing, what they have to realize is that if you're going to build a bridge somewhere, if you're going to build a power plant somewhere, if you're going to build a dam, you need really, really good intelligence about where you're going to build it.
Oh, definitely.
And about the terrain and about what's happening. And that's the kind of thing that they additionally provide, scale and layers.
Right, and people probably don't
depth.
think about that at all. Satellites, why would you use a satellite to build a bridge?
Right. I think a lot of people think of it more like the way you see it in kind of military technology, where, every time like North Korea does something, it's like, oh, we've got satellite images and we've got some like super zoomed in photograph.
Anytime there's a natural disaster, you get satellite images of what it looked like before the wave, what it looked like after the wave.
Exactly. And that's why when I encourage people, when we talk about the satellite industry, I encourage people to think differently about it than what they may have seen on television, what they may have traditionally kind of thought about satellites. And so, in Maxar's case, they make relatively big satellites. They make large satellite platforms. They have a network of about a half dozen or so image satellites that perform those kinds of tasks that we talked about. But the big thing going forward, it's not going to be big satellites, because like any other technology, it's shrinking.
Right.
It's
it's
about getting everything smaller. It's about what's being called nanosatellites. It's about smaller satellites.
Okay.
It's about satellite constellations. And the big example here, of course, is SpaceX. With Elon Musk, and they've got Starlink, where they're launching
their internet service.
Right, they're blanketing low Earth orbit with the satellite constellations. They've launched 1,700 satellites to connect people to the internet around the world, in hard to reach places. You look at places like in the Australian outback, or in an small island, the island of Man off of Great Britain. These are places where you're not going to run a bunch of broadband out. You're not going to run lines out.
Right,
You need a low Earth orbit satellite to connect these people to the internet. And, to provide any other kind of digital service, whether it's streaming, like Netflix or Hulu, music streaming, Pandora, Spotify. And like I said, so Starlink itself has just been 1,700 satellites.
Right.
To put that in perspective for you, about 2 years ago, there were a total of roughly 3,000 satellites in the sky, period. They've already launched 1,700.
Wow.
Okay?
That is an impressive feat.
In this decade, from 2020 to 2030, there's going to be 8,500 launched.
8,500 more.
So we are now going from a situation where, from the time of Sputnik up until roughly like 2019, the 20 teens, we had about 3,000 satellites up in the sky. We're going to add more than double that this decade. Okay, so we're going to go from about 3,000 to nearly 12.
That's a lot of satellites. But they're not the satellites that people really think of, right? They're not these huge, satellites that you see the pictures of, in science class and things like that. They're much smaller.
Exactly. They're small. And so that's really what led me to the company that you were alluding to. It's called and what they do is they make small, cheaper satellites. Because in addition to just being just kind of like a risky or bulky endeavor, launching a satellite can be really expensive. And so a lot of times what you even have to do is, if you're going to put a satellite in the sky, you've got to kind of piggyback on someone else who's launching a rocket.
Okay.
So you basically rent a ride. It's almost like getting a cab into space, where you've got this company that's
like Uber rideshare for satellites.
That's exactly what the traditional model is.
Okay, interesting.
And what's wrong with that? I mean, it's expensive. You can't control the timing of it. The satellite doesn't necessarily go up when you want it to. You have to wait till the ride's available. You can't position it where you want it to.
Oh, it has to go wherever the ride's going.
No, it's going where everybody else is going. It's more of a bus stop type thing. So what we're looking at with this company, they make these smaller rockets, and their goal is to just launch them almost daily by 2025. Wow. So almost 300 launches a year by 2025, and they want to do it basically on just a contract basis. So if you're a company, if you're, AT&T or Verizon or whatever, Comcast, and you want to put a satellite up, you don't have to wait for a ride share. You don't have to make do with whatever's available to you and not get the satellite exactly where you want it. Because, again, we're talking about internet coverage. It has to be in a certain spot if you're going to get it to that remote region.
You've got a blank spot.
Yeah, you can't get it in Alaska to some remote village in Alaska if you're on the southern side of the orbit or whatever. So you got to have it in the right position.
Gotcha.
And that's what this company does. And they're trying to launch these rockets, these smaller rockets, like I said, at that clip, at about ultimately 300 a year, and they're going to charge initially about $2.5 million for launch. They're going to try to get that down to $1 million.
Okay.
They want to make it smaller, faster, cheaper, so that these companies can do what they want to do, which is blanket the low Earth orbit with satellite coverage for internet connectivity, any kind of phone, 5G, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the area we're moving into.
Well, and that sounds like a really interesting, almost sort of backdoor way to invest into Starlink, because Starlink, that's still a private company, and if they want to get that many satellites up, then they're going to need some sort of option. I mean, they could keep sending them up on those SpaceX rockets, but for anybody out there who thinks 2.5 million or 1 million per launch sounds expensive, to get it up in one of these these heavy rockets that that you see with the SpaceX and the Blue Origin rockets and things like that, that's going to be 100 maybe even more times.
Yeah, it's much more expensive.
We're talking more like billions than millions.
And so it's a really interesting company because their entire launch apparatus can be fit into 4 cargo containers.
Oh wow!
They can drive it. They can get it anywhere on the planet in 24 hours.
That's great. That's impressive.
What they're basically telling people is look, if you've got a parking lot big enough, if you've got a gravel pit, we can get there and we can get a rocket up.
That's awesome.
And we can do it quickly, we can do it cheaply, because they also manufacture their own parts. That's a big thing. When you get into satellite manufacture and you get into, and we've all been talking about supply chain issues recently, right? Yeah. So we know how hard that's been. Getting satellite parts, it's expensive, it's difficult, and it requires a lot of time, and it's expensive. So what they're doing is they're just producing as much of those rockets in-house as they possibly can, so that they can be very nimble, be very fast, and get these things up en masse. Because, like I said, that's really what we're looking at. We're talking about thousands of satellites that are going to be going up.
That's impressive, and it just makes perfect sense too, because if we want to blanket lower Earth orbit with satellites, then we just can't send one big rocket up with a couple thousand satellites in it and just let them out.
Right.
They're just going to all be right there. We'll have great internet coverage in that one spot, but nothing anywhere else.
Correct. And even just the perspective on it, we can't put thousands on a single rocket, but right now, like what Starlink did, they put 143 on a single rocket.
Okay.
So you can fit hundreds of these satellites on a single rocket.
And if you have your own rocket company like Elon Musk does, you can sort of put them wherever you want.
Or you can charge whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. If people want to catch a ride with you, they're kind of, at what you want to do. But if you want to do it by yourself and you want to go to, an independent contractor, you want to go to a company that specializes in this, where this is their business, and they're just here for you, and they're going to do it to your specifications, and they're going to do it quickly, well, then that's what this company's going to provide.
Impressive.
They just went public. I would say they just went public over the summer.
Okay, so that's probably one of the reasons that they're still so under the radar.
Yeah, exactly. A few of these companies, it's still trading really low. It's below about $10 a share still, which is roughly where it listed. Okay. And they also got a big milestone coming up, because they've been working, in addition to obviously doing private sector work. They are already reaching out, and they've already struck deals with the government, because this is the thing for the government.
That's where you really want to get the money
exactly. From. This isn't even just a private sector thing. There, when we look at something like Space Force. Space Force is going to have to launch a ton of satellites. They know this, and so this company, they've already conducted one test, trying to launch a package for Space Force. They've got a second one coming up, a second trial coming up in November, where they're going to try to do this and demonstrate that they have the capability to do it, and that they can be a long-term partner for the U.S. government and for the U.S. military. That's going to be a huge milestone for them if they can pull it off. And that's coming up in a couple weeks. And I'll tell you what, once that happens, if they succeed in doing that, the stock's going to probably double overnight.
Right,
You're going to see immediate action.
$10
No. People are waiting. I know people right now are kind of skeptical. They're like, can you do this? Because it's a big ask. When you say, oh, we're going to launch all these satellites, we're going to do it cheaply, we're going to make our own rockets in-house, we're going to drive our cargo out to Kodiak, Alaska, and just start firing them off. It's kind of like, can you? Will you? And
that is huge.
People want to see it first. But if you're an investor and you want to maximize the gains, you kind of can't wait for that.
Right.
You kind of have to go. You got to put the risk up.
Right.
And
exactly.
that's kind of where it's at. And I think come November, when this company proves what it can do, I think it's really going to be something of a homecoming for them.
It's not going to be flying under the radar anymore.
No, I don't. I think it's going to be pretty much way out in the open.
Yeah. No, that is really exciting. That's really exciting. And so there you have it from one of our experts here. It sounds like this company really has something going for it. Honestly, it sounds like, if Starlink or anybody really wants to have a successful satellite-based internet program, they're going to need rockets like this. And we've got a test coming up that, if it's successful, could double the stock. Now, you might have noticed that when Jason mentioned the name, we beeped it out. That's because this is a recommendation for his paying subscribers. And you all know how serious I am about protecting our paying subscribers. I'm serious about protecting Jason's as well. So if you'd like to learn more about it and more about his investing service, you can find a link in the description below the video on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the email that I send it out to with the Wealth Advisory. And Jason, again, thanks for coming in and talking about that. And also, thanks for providing me a perfect segue into our top 10 list, because Maxar is actually my number one pick this month.
Terrific. Well, thanks for having me. Like I said, we've known each other for a long time. This is great. I hope we have more chats like this.
Oh, I really hope so, too. It's I think I'd really like to have you on more. I'd like to have some more people on. I think that it's a great opportunity. So, awesome. Let's get into the list, and you stick around and see where we're investing this month.
Let's do it.
Okay, so like I said, my first pick is going to be Maxar, both because Jason and I just talked about space stocks, and because honestly it looks like it could have a lot of short-term momentum behind it. It's been trading in a really tight range recently, and it's close to the bottom of that range now, so I think it's really got a chance to pop up this month. So Maxar is number one. Next up, I'm going to keep Bank of America in the fold this month. I learned my lesson about cutting winners a few months ago. Bank of America was a winner. I think we got about a 10% gain out of it this month. So I'm going to let it keep running. I said banks were looking cheap. Someone was obviously listening. And they're less cheap now than they were last month, but I think there's still room for another 10%. So we're bringing Bank of America in as number two. And then, believe it or not, Bunge, or as I used to like to call it, Bung, is a momentum stock right now. It's got some momentum behind it. It's a boring company, but it seems like investors really like it. Shares were up double digits last month, so I'm going to bring it into the top 10 this month and see if that trend sticks around and gives us some gains. Number four on the list this month is going to be Dick's Sporting Goods. You guys know I love Dick's Sporting Goods. It's the top stock in our portfolio this year. So far, it's up, I think, over 130% for the year. I mean, it's just been performing so well, and I'm positive it's got more to go before the year's out. Management is getting ready to report quarterly numbers late in November, and recently those numbers have just been off the charts, and every single time they report, the stock jumps. I think we've got another blockbuster round of results coming our way, so I want to get it back into the top 10 this month. Next up, number 5, rounding out my first 5, is Innovative Industrial Properties. I've always said, when this stock gets into the top 10, it doesn't come out for a long time. And honestly, it was a big winner. It's been a winner for me the past couple of months, so I've let it run, and I'm going to keep letting it run. I really don't see any reason to break up a good thing, So that's going to be number 5. Number 6 on the list this month is another momentum play that might sort of surprise you. It's Prologis, a real estate investment trust. Usually those don't have a ton of momentum behind them, but it's showing some signs of being a runner. Shares got off to a good start last month. They nearly put in a double-digit gain. So I think we're going to see if we can get another 10% out of the trend in November too. Another real estate investment trust making the list this month was Hannon Armstrong. That's another winner that we're going to let run this month. It was it was up a couple, double digits last month. We were up, just over 11% last month. So we're going to let that one run again. I think, honestly, it's just a smart investment when everybody's clamoring for carbon reduction, but nobody's really lining up to turn off their AC or the refrigerator. So it's obvious that either the government or private enterprise needs to step in and do something. And you all know that I think private enterprise is way more efficient at allocating capital. So that's why I expect Hannon Armstrong to get more than a few government incentives, coming its way in the coming years. So that's our number 7 pick. Coming in number 8, we're going a little bit out into the technology world and bringing QuantumScape on. I think QuantumScape was actually a pick last month and didn't do well. It was down about 4%. Management actually reported earnings yesterday. We're recording this on the 27th. They reported after the close on the 26th, and they missed EPS estimates, but they reported a solid cash position, and more importantly, they reported that they finally had third-party tests done on their batteries, and the third-party testing verified what they already knew, that their batteries are awesome. So that's really great news because everybody was sort of clamoring for them to let us look at your data, let us look at your batteries, and they've always held it really close to the chest. So nobody was really sure if their test results were accurate. But now we've got evidence that they are. We also got a new partnership with a big automaker. They wouldn't announce the name, but it's another OEM, a big one in addition to Volkswagen. I think really big things are ahead for the stock. I think the sell-off has been overdone, and I think that we all need to be adding it. So it's number 8 this month. And let's see, more technology for number 9. Going with, this is one of our newer stocks, so we're going to cover up the name here, but it's another winner. I had it in last month. We got about 14% out of it. There's a lot of momentum behind it. I love it in the long term. I really honestly think this is going to be one of our best investments ever. It's following right along its 20-day moving average, and it's sort of bouncing off that right now. So I think we're going to see some more gains this month, and if it can get another 10%, I think that puts us in a really good spot. And so that's number 9. I've got one more spot to fill, and I can't resist the dad joke. So speaking of spots, I'm putting Spotify in. I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody in the room here. I can't resist a terrible dad joke, and that was a terrible, terrible dad joke. But really, Spotify's it started moving again this past month, and it looks like that momentum could hold out for a little while longer. Management reported earnings this morning before the market opened, and EPS was below estimates, but revenue grew by 26% and beat expectations. Monthly active users grew by 19%, and premium subscribers grew by 19% as well. I mean, that could totally start an upward drift because the monthly active users and the premium subscribers, that's what people are really watching for here. The EPS estimates being off, well, that's more the analyst being wrong than the company not performing. Revenue grew, earnings grew, monthly active users grew, premium subscribers grew. I think that can start an upward trend for the stock that could last the next couple of weeks. So I'm putting it in to round out the top 10. And let's go through a little recap here. We've got Maxar, Bank of America, Bunge, Dick's Sporting Goods, Innovative Industrial Properties, Prologis, Hannon Armstrong, QuantumScape, and Spotify. And that's our top 10 for November. And thank you all for tuning in. Jason, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And for everybody watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the like button, and hit that bell to make sure you get notified when we post new content.